We're at the Defence24 days here in Warsaw. Now I'd like to welcome to TVP World General Ben Hodges, the former commanding army officer here in Europe. Thank you for joining us.
Don, thanks for the privilege.
Now, we've seen a lot in the last 100 days of Donald Trump, and we've seen a lot of difficult moves. It looks like at the beginning he tried to get the Russians to come to the table. Now that looks a little bit more difficult. Do you see at least a little bit of light there in the tunnel that perhaps Trump has realized the realities of Vladimir Putin?
So I think President Zelensky was very wise in how he has dealt with the pressure, the terrible treatment from the U.S. administration, and now it does look like it's paying off a little bit. I think President Trump realizes that the Russians have made him look foolish. They never were interested in any kind of a realistic negotiation, never were going to do anything, agree to anything that would allow Ukraine to survive as a state. He sees that now. And so whatever his motivation, if President Trump now is willing to allow aid to resume to Ukraine, even if it's in the form of sales, at least that gets going again. That's a positive thing. Intelligence sharing, I hope, will continue. But the president has real leverage he could use against the Kremlin. He could wreck their oil and gas industry. He could put more sanctions on, and then of course he can open up the floodgates of support to Ukraine. And it feels like it's turning that way a little bit. But again, the motivation is more, I think he's angry at Putin because they made him look foolish.
The minerals deal. I've talked to Ukrainian MPs who say let's concentrate first on the economic aspects. It's a great thing that it got signed, and then later on deal with the security elements of that, security guarantees, what have you. Do you think that this deal binds the United States to Ukraine and contributes to a potential turning point?
That's hard to say. I think it's a little bit of a stretch to think that the Russians would not launch missiles in an area where you had an American business. I mean, they do that. We had businesses in Ukraine before. So it helps, and I was glad that the idea that somehow proceeds from Ukraine, from this mining, would pay the U.S. for aid that was given in the past. That was a terrible idea. It's, I think, immoral, actually. So I'm glad that that part's gone. And if it does help contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine, I think it's a good thing. But now, if the U.S. really, if this administration really wants to benefit from this deal, then they will have, the U.S. will have, the U.S. will have an interest in keeping Russia away from Ukraine. You know, the Western Black Sea, for ships to be able to leave Odessa with whatever they've recovered, for example. So all in all, I think this probably is a good deal for Ukraine.
Now, we have Vladimir Putin trying to show goodwill to the Trump administration by saying that it wants a ceasefire for the May 9th victory parades there in Moscow. Do you think that Volodymyr Zelensky should abide by these? Is the military parade in Moscow, in the Kremlin, is that a legitimate military target in your?
It absolutely is a legitimate target, number one. Number two, when the Russians first proposed the 3-day ceasefire, you know, the Ukrainian prime minister immediately said, why 3 days? Why not 30 days? Nobody believes that Russia would ever live up to any ceasefire. And so this 3-day thing, while it maybe was intended to curry favor with the U.S. administration, it really is because they did not want drones or rockets landing on Red Square during this parade. I think that Ukraine will be very clever on whatever it is they do, whether they hit it during the parade or maybe they hit it the day before or whatever. Or they may just hit targets all around it while so much air defense is focused on Moscow. The Ukrainians have proven to be more clever than the Russians from day one of this war, and I'm sure they'll do that again. But absolutely, that is a legitimate target. And I would ask, Russian people should be asking Putin, wait a minute, we have more than 900,000 casualties in this war, and we're no better now than we were 3 years ago. It's a colossal failure for Russia. Why is he having a big parade? I mean, what's the purpose of this? If you have all these people and equipment, why aren't they at the fight?
Right, and especially since they're deploying so many units around Moscow just to protect the airspace. Well, now I'd like to move on to security here in Europe. Obviously, again, the Trump administration has abrupted the global order, if you will. And now Europe is having to depend more on itself, be more self-reliant, and determine its own future in terms of security, especially here on the continent and opposing Russia. Do you see that the signs are positive in these regards concerning Europe and its ability to want to take responsibility for its own security?
Well, at least I see an increased recognition by European leaders that they have to do that. They're acknowledging that Russia is a threat. In the past, people are like, well, and if you don't acknowledge the threat, then you can avoid doing anything about it. Now people are more sober about Russia as an actual threat. And of course, people here in Poland are not confused about it. People in Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they're not confused. They know what the threat is. But we still don't see enough decisive action to do something. I mean, you saw last week there were comments that they could only come up with 25,000 troops. 25,000? I mean, Poland has almost 300,000. Germany has 150,000. France, all these countries together have huge numbers. So they're not lacking capability, they're lacking self-confidence and some strategic backbone.
Political will?
Yeah, that's what I mean. They don't have the political will because they're like, we're not sure who's going to do this. It's a lot of hand-wringing. But if you could step back from that and realize that the combined economies, militaries, defense industry of Europe dwarfs Russia, dwarfs it. Why is there no will or self-confidence to do what people know needs to be done? I don't understand that.
No, I'd like to ask you about an event such as the Defence24 days. You've been here before. You come to the Security Forum, the Warsaw Security Forum. How important are events like these based on what's going on today in our security environment?
So these are important because look who's here. You've got people, industry and officers and diplomats from all over the world come here. And Poland is increasingly a center for this. You have MSPO in Kielce, you have Warsaw Security Forum, you have Defence24, and there are other events that happen here. So Poland has increasingly become this kind of center for these sort of activities. So it's a thought leader. But also it's an opportunity to help influence leaders on important decisions they make about procurement. People focus on F-35s or long-range missiles or big things, but just as important are soldier uniforms. What the soldier wears is an important part of his confidence, his effectiveness, just like a professional athlete. Lewandowski, the uniform he wears for the Polish national team and the shoes, the boots he wears, those are not something they just pull out of a local sporting goods store. It's the best quality gear so that Poland's national team can perform as well as possible. Well, the same thing is true for soldiers and sailors and airmen. You want to put them in the best possible equipment where they can operate effectively in all conditions. And not only for comfort and durability, but also, what we see with drones that can see everything. So increasingly, the uniform is part of that protection. If it blocks infrared, it's also safety, flame retardant, for example. So these are the kind of things that you only really get to learn about if you come to a big show like this, so that you can talk to experts.
All right, General Ben Hodges, thank you very much for being my guest today. I very much appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. We're at Defence24 Days, as it's taking place on Tuesday and Wednesday. Thanks for joining us.